Now, Rastafari has played a vital role in diversity in Britain. This month, Black Cultural Archives in Brixton will be the first to showcase Rastafari in Motion, an exhibition telling the story of the emergence of the Rastafari movement in Britain and the influence of the Emperor Haile Selassie on raising the consciousness of the black youth from the 1960s onwards. Our reporter Adam Amunu went along to find out more.
I'm here in Brixton, which is one of the most multicultural areas within London and has one of the largest concentrations of African-Caribbean communities within the UK. And I'm here today to look at a special exhibition devoted entirely to the Rastafarian community and their contribution within the UK. Rastafari in Motion tells the rarely told story of the presence of Emperor Haile Selassie I and the emergence of the Rastafari movement in Britain. It's also in celebration of the 80th anniversary of Emperor Haile Selassie I's appearance before the League of Nations, his 4-year residency in Bath, and his influence on the rising consciousness of black youth from the 1960s onwards. The exhibition holds artefacts citing Mussolini's invasion of Ethiopia in the 1930s and the importance of both British and Pan-African groups in their support of Haile Selassie in the UK.
Pan-Africanism is in the heart of the Rastafari movement. But in terms of Pan-Africanism as a movement, certainly you can see the initiation of Pan-Africanism in the works of His Majesty when he came to Britain in 1936. And all these organizations who were in Britain came to his aid, came around him. You know, the Friends of Ethiopia, the Gold Coast Aborigines Protected Society.
It's an exhibition that took 4 years to complete. Black Cultural Archives are the first to present the exhibition, which was first shown at the National Museum of Ethiopia in Addis Ababa in 2014, and it's the first of its kind in the United Kingdom. This exhibition not only introduces the mystic world of Rastafari, but takes a closer look at the contributions made to British society by Rastas, and specifically during the 60s and 70s, where many young Caribbeans were turning to an alternative identity.
That generation was kind of lost in a kind of moral wasteland. You know, they weren't included in the educational system. Their history was not included. You had British history that didn't really relate to them, except in an oppressive sense that, you know, we were former slaves. So there was no appreciation or highlighting of values that related to that generation, that post-Windrush generation that grew up in Britain, you know, after the 50s, 60s, etc.
The Rasta community are also shown in the exhibition to have been instrumental in fighting racism and standing up for justice.
We find that Rastafari thinking has played a very important role in the uplifting of black people in Britain, in making them see perhaps being more conscious of themselves, of their own identity, as distinct from being, you know, just amalgamated into the British system and, you know, straightening their hair and dyeing, you know, and you know, whitening their skin, and all these values that negate Africa's beauty, Africa's power, Africa's self.
Well, to discuss this further, we have Ras Gubby-Wold, also known as Ja Blue. He's Rasta and has been politically active in the UK for a number of years. Thank you, Ja Blue, for coming on to the programme. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Blessed love and greetings, to everyone.
Okay. Tell us more about Rastafari Emotion. What's behind the title? What is it trying to do?
Rastafari in Motion basically is dealing with the awareness now of what the Rasta community have done in the past and what we're doing now and what we hope to do in the future. And as the program stated rightly, a lot of people are still not aware of the contribution that the Rasta community have made to the African community in Britain. For example, during the 50s in West London, there was a man called Peter Ratchman who controlled the housing market. Although we were invited to come to this country to help with the rebuilding after the war, there was no preparation made for us, no resettlement program, right? We didn't come and go into a council house or go into any bed and breakfast. None of those facilities were offered to us. So people had to really make do. And this guy, Peter Ranchman, he had loads of houses in West London, and he would rent it to the early Afro-Caribbean community. Like the men would come in and 20 men to a room, 10 would be sleeping in the day while 10 work at night, and vice versa. So that was the kind of condition that some of our elders faced until, they used to, if you couldn't pay your rent, he actually had henchmen who would come around to your house with Alsatian dog and demand the rent until they really come to some Rastafarian house, and these people really, put up a very strong resistance. And it came to attention of the government, and the housing policy changed because of that. A lot of people is not aware, but it was direct involvement from the Rasta community who make these things happen. But our community, they've never seek to try to take the limelight or anything. We're very modest, humble people, just fighting for equal rights and justice for our people and ourselves.
Indeed, indeed. So the effect of Rasta in terms of the way in which Rastafari has brought this consciousness, when we say that, what do we mean? What's the actual function that Rastafari did for the people in the 60s and the 70s? And why was there a connect to Rastafari that there perhaps wasn't with something else?
No, because in the 60s, we are the generation of the 60s. You have to realize that, most of the people who came in the early Windrush, they were elders. But we were the young people who came in our early teens, 10, 11, 12. The sus generation, you'd call us, right?
Our viewers will know that the sus generation, this is when the police used to use what's called the suspicious law and used to stop black people at random.
Yes.
And basically, there were a lot of incidences of black people getting beaten up and killed in custody. That was the kind of atmosphere that things were
in those days. Then you must remember in the 60s, it was very racist, There was no equal rights thing or anything like that. People was attacked physically because of the color of their skin. So it was a very, like it has said, toxic atmosphere at the time, right? In the late 60s, the Rastafarian community was here then, but it was very low-keyed until some of the elders decided to bring my generation, we come in the late 60s, early 70s, and we began to really sit down, reason with them. The problem of Africa, the problem of African people, because as you know, in the 60s, the African-American people were fighting for their civil rights.
Indeed.
All of South Africa was under colonial domination, Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa. So this was the environment that we grew up in at the time. So, although you had Pan-Africanist group in this country, you had brethren who was part of the Black Power movement here, the Black Panther movement. But some of us, like myself, who was already grounded within Rastafari from an early age in Jamaica, and we started to meet our elders, that was the part that we took. And we actually brought it onto the street now, whereas our elder before just said that they would educate themselves to return to Jamaica.
Yeah.
We took it onto the streets, where people started to see a lot of youths wearing red, green, and gold. It's like people didn't know what was happening around them, but it was the spirit of Rastafari move.
Educate us on the significance of the colors of the red, green, and gold.
The ice green and gold is part of the rainbow tradition, right? But it's the ancient colors of Ethiopia. Because, Ethiopia is very significant to us as the first civilization on this planet. Civilization come down the River Nile. It didn't go up the Nile, it came down the Nile. So sometimes people stop at Egypt and don't go further up the Nile. So we try to remind them of that and let them know. The awareness was that, before black people didn't have any their history and their culture was withheld from them. We didn't know about our great African past, our heritage, the great heritage and history that we have. Rastafari bring us to that awareness. And it re-energized us. You know, it let us become more confident and positive in ourselves.
Indeed, and
we
can't downplay, in fact, the effect or the significance of Rastafari in music and the reggae culture, which it was all about educating people about
spreading the message.
That's right, and the connections with Africa. So that was very important, wasn't it? And of course, the figure at the central figure at the center of all of this is, of course, the Emperor Haile Selassie.
Yeah, man, His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie I. We revere him and we give him divine status. A lot of people don't see it, a lot of people don't agree with it. But we are saying nobody have a monopoly on God. Nobody can say they know exactly who God or what. And in other cultures, like for instance the Asians, some of them accept the cow as a spiritual thing. The people of Tibet see the Dalai Lama as a God king. Nobody queries these things, but because we as Africans say Haile Selassie, who is the 225th rebirth of King Solomon the Magnificent, descended from Solomon and Sheba, and it's all there in the record, it's verified and everything. We say that he is the Christ of this dispensation, the returned Messiah who walk amongst us, right, in the Christ-like figure. You know, he didn't come to heal the sick and raise the dead. He come to sit in judgment and justice, to execute righteousness and justice on the earth, you know?
Indeed, he's very famous for making that speech in the United Nations.
88 years to this day.
88 days to this day, that's right. Tell us about that speech and its significance.
The significance of that speech was that at that time, as we know, no African countries were allowed to get arms from the League of Nations if you wasn't a part of the League of Nations. And there was a treaty that was signed earlier that says no African countries must be given arms or sold arms. So His Majesty, being the first Ethiopia being the first black country to become part of the League of Nations, and the covenant says it's one for all and all for one. So when Italy tried this aggression on Ethiopia, His Majesty said, come on, you guys are supposed to give me guns and I'm to defend my country. But racist as they were, they all rejected it. Poland, Czechoslovakia, France, they all said no, you know, we won't give. And His Majesty pronounced a judgment. It's the only prophetic utterance or speech ever by any head of state where he said, if you light a match in Ethiopia, it's going to burn Europe. And significantly it happened because Poland, which was one of the first countries to deny Ethiopia the right to arm, Hitler marched in there like weeks after, Czechoslovakia, and all of them suffer. And the United Kingdom, Britain, seeing what was happening, decided to help Ethiopia's cause by bringing one of her greatest general, a man named General Wingate, who went back to Ethiopia with His Majesty through Khartoum, and 5 years to the very day, 25th of May, 1945, His Majesty reclaimed back Ethiopia and continued the building as a young king. Because a lot of people remember this, right? His Majesty, when he got the authority to manage the country, he didn't have a civil service. He didn't have a parliament. He didn't have none of the mechanism of so-called modern government. He bring Ethiopia from out of like the 18th century and bring it into the 20th century on his own. So sometimes people don't realize the magnitude of what this man did, you know, even as a normal man. Take the God part out of it, right? That's his contribution as that, his significance.
We don't have that much time left at Javlu, but it's a fascinating conversation that we're having. And in particular, this connection between the Rastafaris and Ethiopia, because you were given a property out in Ethiopia.
Shashamane, the land grant.
Yes. Tell us a bit about that.
His Majesty gave us the land grant for the black people of the world who supported Ethiopia during the fascist Ethiopian War. And he said, for you Afro-Caribbean people who wants to come back and help with the rebuilding, here is the token of my appreciation. And he gave us 500 hectares of land. The land is there today. You were there
recently, weren't you?
Yes, I just came back. You know, it's beautiful, you know. But naturally, we need more development on the ground. We still have a bit of problem in terms of citizenship and these things.
Indeed.
But we hope that these things will be resolved with the Ethiopian government. All successive government in Ethiopia has recognized the land grant. I think there's a little bit of problem from our side is that we have not taken on the responsibility to manage it effectively as we should. But that is now, it's changing, and the word motion. We have a term now in Ethiopia where we say unity in motion, which is that all the Rasta mansions have coming together now and do what they're supposed to do.
We don't have much time left, but I want you just to give us a sample of the future of Rasta in motion. What's to come for Rastafari?
Now, the future of Rastafari has always been one thing. We want to return to Africa. We've never taken up political representation. We've never seek to be involved in the political system of the West. Because we said we were brought here against our will. Our ancestors said we were taken from Africa and brought to the West against our will. And we cannot give up a continent for an island. So we never want to become involved. We just want to be returned with reparation, because we say repatriation and reparation. We need to be redressed, put back in our land, and settle back again in the right and proper way.
That's a whole issue that we've got to be dealing with again and again on this program.
Yeah, man.
Ja Blue, thank you very much indeed for coming on the program.
And we thank the Rastafari, Imperial Majesty. Ja Rastafari.
We come to the end of the program. Thank you very much for our guests and for you for watching at home. The largest rough diamond discovered more than 100 years went up for auction at Sotheby's in London on Wednesday, but it failed to sell after the bids for the minimum reserve price was not reached. We leave you with the captivating stone, the Sidi La Rona diamond from Botswana. See you next week.